Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Okay, so this episode marks the end to the Grateful Dead arc, and also this episode in general just kind of showcases Pesci's actual growth as a character, because in this episode just kind of marks his turn to a fully fledged antagonist rather than just a sidekick. But this episode opens up where the last one left off with Bruno actually dragging Prosciutto out of the train using his sticky fingers, and Prosciutto manages to cling onto the edge of the zipper that's about to eject him from the cabin with Bruno actually clinging onto him to try and pull him out, but Prosciutto actually winds up screaming, pointing out that if he goes overboard he'll kill both of them, but it also starts yelling at Pesci to wake up and try and stop the train, and eventually his screams do actually wind up waking Pesci up, and Pesci sees the situation. He's not entirely sure what to do, and Prosciutto merely tells him to stop the train. So Prosciutto decides to immediately go and do that, but Pesci actually not Prosciutto, but Pesci immediately goes to stop the train, but quickly realizes that he actually doesn't know how to stop the train, and realizing that he's actually let Prosciutto down. He only watches the zipper begins to actually wind up closing up around Prosciutto's hands, and he can't really do anything to save him. And it's kind of a last-ditch effort to try and save Prosciutto from going over the edge of the train. Proceeds to pull out to summon his Beach Boy, and proceeds to hook it through Prosciutto's hand to kind of anchor him to the train so that he doesn't go flying off. And it works. The abrupt stop almost causes Bruno to actually let go of him, but Pesci, now relieved that he's actually managed to save Prosciutto, is relieved that now Prosciutto isn't going to die, but also notes that there's a little too much weight on the end of the line, and notes that it feels about the weight of two people, and is convinced that Bruno is still very much clinging onto Prosciutto, and indeed he is. Bruno almost lets go at one point, but he does manage to cling onto Prosciutto's boot, and Prosciutto actually decides to actually praise Bruno for this at this moment. As established in the previous episode, Prosciutto initially didn't think very highly of Bruno, pointing out that he was a failure as a capo for failing to protect his unit, but for prioritizing the life of his unit over their mission, which is to protect Trish. But upon seeing how Bruno was willing to literally sacrifice himself to save Trish and his crew, decided to do a full 180 on that, and decides to actually commend Bruno's resolve instead. But also points out that he's also a bit foolish as a capo, and also points out that he's a bit unlucky, and proceeds to start kicking Bruno in an effort to try and get him to come off. But that doesn't actually wind up working, and Bruno instead tries to get into a close range confrontation with Prosciutto to try and defeat him. But Prosciutto sees Bruno's attack from a mile away and is able to successfully dodge away from it. Bruno actually winds up missing him by like a mile. But at which point, Prosciutto actually summons his Grateful Dead to try and finish Bruno off, and proceeds to punch him in the stomach to try and age him so fast that his stand is no longer effective. But then his punch doesn't land, and then we do find out why. Is that Sex Pistols number 6 is still very much clinging onto Bruno, and has actually stuffed himself down Bruno's shirt and has shielded him with ice so that he doesn't actually age. At which point Bruno merely remarks that he knew very well that he wasn't going to be able to hit Prosciutto in his state. At which point it's revealed what Bruno was actually doing, which is that apparently ahead of time, Sex Pistols number 6 also told Bruno how Beach Boy worked, and explained how the line redirects any attacks that are directly attacked at it, and Bruno used that to his advantage to actually release the cook from Prosciutto's hand, so that Bruno could actually grab it himself and anchor himself to the train and pull himself back up, while Prosciutto actually winds up falling off because Sticky Fingers actually winds up opening a hole in his hand. So yeah, he just winds up Prosciutto actually winds up falling off the train, and Pesci actually does note this, noting that that seems that it's now one load lighter, and wonders if Prosciutto had actually successfully kicked Bruno off. But then after examining the line a little bit more closely, he notes that his pinky was on the wrong, that Prosciutto's pinky is on the wrong side of where it should be. He senses the fact that the pinky has actually switched sides, and after thinking about it for a moment, wonders who could actually be on the other end of the line, and concludes that it might possibly be Bruno. And this does seem to be confirmed because around that time as well, the other passengers on the train wind up waking up and recovering from Grateful Dead's aging ability, and start demanding to know what's going on with Pesci. One of the men actually winds up walking up to Pesci and demanding he stop the train, and demands to know what the hell is going on. At which point Pesci then proceeds to start lamenting over the death of his friend, pointing out that he feels that he clearly has let his friend let Prosciutto down, and now that Prosciutto is dead, that means that eventually the rest of the stand users inside the turtle are going to recover and attack him. And he starts to think about what's going on, about how he's actually a failure as a person, and sure enough, the guy hears all of this babbling out loud, and actually yells at him, calling him a mamoni, which is an insult that Pesci has been frequently called throughout the series, and again here. But then something interesting happens, which is that the civilian actually winds up aging again. Which actually winds up confusing Pesci, and sure enough, Bruno knows that he's starting to age as well. At which point they both look over the train at the same time. Pesci actually pokes his head out the window because he's inside it, while Bruno looks down at it from the roof. And they both discover that Prosciutto isn't quite dead. As we find out, Prosciutto actually he didn't die, but he's very close to it. He wound up getting stuck in the wheels of the train and wound up getting so badly injured that he's barely able to move, and is very likely going to die very, very soon. But and Pesci even remarks this. He points out with wounds like those, Prosciutto isn't likely going to survive very long. But what's also interesting is that Prosciutto is still using his stand, despite knowing that it's likely a last-ditch attempt, and that he's likely not going to be able to fight back with it. And Pesci, remembering what Prosciutto said to him about not letting go of your stand until the very end, starts to respect Prosciutto's resolve, and realizing that he's using the last of his strength to support Pesci, even if it costs him his life. Pesci then begins to start taking all of Prosciutto's lessons to heart, and starts thinking about what it actually means to be an assassin. At which point he then proceeds to kind of develop a bit more of a mental shift. As we find out, because Prosciutto had so much faith in him to actually finish the job and finish off the Bruno and his allies. That Bruno it falls to Pesci to now finish his mission and kill the rest of Team Bucciardi at all costs. With that, he then becomes a fully fledged assassin, and to demonstrate his newfound resolve, snaps the neck of the man who was yelling at him earlier, concluding that now nobody can actually call him a mamoni. At which point, and it's at this point where he actually decides to use his Beach Boy to actually attack Bruno on the roof, since while he can't see him, he can sense where he is, and begins to start using the line to actually try and cut up Bruno and reach down his arm. And Sex Pistols number 6 actually warns Bruno about this, pointing out that if it goes up his arm, it'll eventually reach a vital organ. And Bruno, in an effort to try and stop that from happening, actually winds up opening up a hole with his sticky fingers in his hand to actually get the hook to fly out. But Pesci actually predicts this and actually finds another part of Bruno to actually latch onto. And Bruno quickly realizes that it's useless to try and actually get the hook out of himself, because every time he does, Pesci just reorients his Beach Boy to hit Bruno again, and Bruno is quickly realizing there's no way of actually getting through. So at which point Pesci decides that he's had enough of Bruno, and that if Bruno isn't actually going to die peacefully, then he might as well share the same fate as Prosciutto did. And with that, he then proceeds to use his Beach Boy to actually fling Bruno off the top of the train, but Bruno winds up saving himself by catching a rivet with his sticky fingers, which he winds up clinging onto. And Prosciutto and Pesci, realizing that Bruno is still very much alive and still trying to save himself, proceeds to try and fling him up into the electrical wires above the train, but Bruno merely retaliates to that by actually punching a hole in the top of the train and proceeding to go through. At which point he actually lands in the cabin, and Pesci actually does note this, pointing out that it doesn't feel like Bruno's at the top of the train anymore, and eventually concludes that he's inside the train itself, and quickly realizes that he's nearby, and but points out that it's probably too late, and points out that now that he knows where Bruno is, he actually just has to accelerate the hook through his body so that it'll actually hit Bruno's heart and kill him. So he proceeds to do exactly that, and Bruno quickly realizes that he has no real way of actually defending against it, and has to do a bit of a desperate measure. And Sex Pistols number 6 points out that it isn't able to help either, since obviously it's too small, and they tried that already with Mista, and that didn't work out very well. So Bruno points out that now is just a matter of proving whose resolve is better than each other's, and with that proceeds to repeatedly attack Beach Boy's line to separate himself into tiny little pieces, which does work, and Beach Boy's hook actually winds up falling out of him, but this actually winds up having an inverse problem against Bruno, which is that he can't breathe anymore. So and Sex Pistols number 6 even points this out, pointing out that what Bruno did was very crazy and very risky, and that there's a very good chance that he'll die if he isn't able to pull himself back together, literally. But Bruno remarks that he just needs to stay still and not make any noise, and he hopes eventually Pesci will go away. And initially Pesci seems like he is going to go away, but eventually points out that there's no way that Bruno could vanish that quickly without him noticing. And points out that obviously he has to still be inside the cabin if he's still there at all. So he decides to actually look around, pointing out that all he has to do is look for a heartbeat. And initially he winds up hitting a passenger, which causes Bruno to freak out because he's quickly realizing that Pesci can actually track him by heartbeat as well. So he makes another desperate attempt, especially as Beach Boy's hook is actually landing on it, which is to chop his own heart in half using his stand to try and stop his heart from beating, so that Pesci will actually not notice it. And this actually does wind up becoming yet another risky maneuver, because we sort of demonstrated with Jotaro in an earlier arc, but yeah, a human being can't really last long without their heart pumping, and obviously this is a stand-induced heart attack, so obviously this is a problem. But yeah, and even Sex Pistols number 6 points out that if Bruno isn't careful, he'll very likely die from this. But Bruno merely remarks that it's a matter of resolve, and that he will succeed even if no matter what. But eventually Pesci does eventually give up on the cabin when he can't find Bruno's breathing or heartbeat, and eventually just withdraws his Beach Boy and tries to figure out how to stop the train, so he can figure out how to save Prosciutto. And Bruno actually, and once his Beach Boy is gone, Bruno actually does try to piece himself back together, but quickly realizes that it's out of the range of his stand, and he actually can't reach his body parts to put his heart back together, so he can pull himself together. But to make matters worse, the train is sliding all of his body parts around, so he can't actually reach any of them. He eventually realizes that he may have been a bit unlucky and really will die an unlucky capo. But it's at this point. And also, Sex Pistol number 6 tries and fails to help, but can't reach any of his body parts. But it's at this point where Pesci eventually decides to stop figuring out how to stop the train and decides to just smash it apart with brute force, and that winds up working. And that also winds up working in Bruno's favor because he does stops the train so that he can actually get his pieces back together, and eventually he does piece his heart back together so that he can actually, so it actually starts breathing again, and then the rest of him winds up following suit, and he points out that it was very dangerous and he was just lucky there. At which point, as Pesci is running out of the train to try and save Prosciutto, he actually winds up ripping a hole in the side with his sticky fingers and actually climbing through the resulting zipper. He then proceeds to, and Pesci does proceed to panic, and Bruno does point out that he did very much get lucky in that fight, pointing out that it took a great deal of luck to actually be able to get into within striking distance of Pesci so that he could actually fight back against him. And but Pesci isn't willing to go down without a fight, and declares that he's going to kill Bruno for what he did to Prosciutto. And declares that he's not going to back down, and he's going to make sure that Bruno suffers a cruel death, much like Bruno did to Prosciutto. And Prosciutto, watching this whole exchange, actually decides to start cheering Pesci on from the sidelines, and even activates his Grateful Dead one last time to actually possibly aid Pesci in the fight. But in case with that, the two then proceed to get into a battle. Bruno has a pretty smart idea to actually just rush straight at Pesci with his arms crossed in front of him, so that Pesci will actually wind up traveling up the length of his arm instead of going straight for his heart. But Pesci immediately predicts that that's what Bruno is going for, and immediately goes for his heart anyway and wraps it around in his wire. Pointing out that normally he goes for a long roundabout way until if he can't actually see where his opponent is, but remarks that since he knows exactly where Bruno is, he doesn't have to toy around with him nearly as much, and declares that now that he has his hook around Bruno's heart, he's going to finally kill him. But Bruno merely remarks that he merely reiterates Prosciutto's sentiment from earlier in the chapter, which is that he should only say that after he's actually done the deed, and then proceeds to he basically proceeds to snap on Pesci's neck with his own stand. Long story short, he just grabs the Beach Boys line, wraps it around Pesci's neck, and breaks Pesci's neck with the stand, which causes Beach Boy to both disperse and Pesci to become fatally wounded in the process. And Pesci even remarks that this is how he's actually going to die, and wonders if it. Then remarks that he actually does have one last ace up his sleeve. And proceeds to release Trish, telling Bruno that he's won the fight, and he deserves to at least be able to protect the girl some more. But then proceeds to remark that he's not going to just let his death be the end of him, and not that he's going to actually slight Bruno one last time before he goes down. And sure enough, both Bruno and Sex Pistols number 6 are a little confused as to where Trish came from, but then it's revealed that at some point, because he's been hanging around the cabin area, Pesci actually wound up slipping Coco Jumbo into his pocket, and proceeds to declare that as he dies, he's going to smash Coco Jumbo on a rock, so that the rest of Bruno's crew actually dies with him, which is a pretty smart idea. And But Bruno merely remarks that it's clear now that Pesci's newfound bravery has turned to what is it called, to cruelty, and remarks that now he's no longer an assassin, is more so a piece of shit. But Pesci remarks that now that this is the end for his crew, but Bruno really remarks that he doesn't seem to understand, and remarks that even if he's a piece of shit, he's going to lose no matter what, and proceeds to unzip Sticky Finger's fist to actually grab Prosciutto before he can actually just smash the turtle on the ground, and proceeds to defeat him with a stand rush of his own before unzipping Pesci into a bunch of pieces and tossing him into a nearby river. And interestingly enough, and I think I should mention this, so Bruno Bacciarti's stand cry is the Italian word for goodbye, which is just really funny. But the way he says it is just he starts to say it, and then he starts to say it repeatedly as his stand cry fashion, and then he ends it with the actual word, which I think is kind of funny. But in any case, with Pesci now dealt with, the rest of, and with Prosciutto actually dying of his wounds shortly after, both of the assassins from the Hitman team are now dead, and And the rest of the crew is now safe and sound and has returned back to normal and are no longer aging at an alarming rate. But Trish actually has a couple of questions for Bruno and asks her if he can ask him a couple of them. But Bruno merely remarks that that's not part of his job description and politely declines. But Trish merely tells him that it wasn't a request and proceeds to demand him why he should risk his life for a father she never knew. And also, more to the point, and this is actually where the episode starts to get a little bit interesting and does confirm something that we've been saying for a while. Why is it that she can suddenly see stuff flying around and then proceeds to gesture to a handprint laying on the ground? And also during this entire stint where she starts lecturing Bruno, she actually flares up with a stand aura, but we don't actually see her stand. But that actually winds up concluding something we've been saying for a while, that the bad guys have been saying, and now Bruno outright confirms it in the episode himself. Trish is confirmed in this moment to be a stand user. Which means that she is indeed a powerful and effective stand user, and while we don't know what her stand is yet, it's safe to assume that she will eventually develop her stand and figure out how to summon it properly. So, yeah, eventually she will wind up I do think she will eventually wind up becoming an effective member of Team Bucciarati, even though she hasn't really figured out how to use her stand yet, and obviously she won't for a while. But more to the point, once he's actually answered Trish's questions, he then decides to actually loot Prosciutto's corpse to see if they have any other leads, since obviously the train is out, and discovers to his horror that Prosciutto has actually informed the rest of his team and has let them know how the group is actually traveling and how they're actually getting to Venice, and also has likely informed them about the turtle as well. So obviously obviously Coco Jumbo has been compromised and they have no real solution of how to actually get there, but merely remarks that they'll just have to keep pushing on foot, and that they'll eventually wind up finding their way to their next location. And with that, they proceed to get up and leave and proceed to go to Venice on foot, since obviously they can't use the train anymore, and that's actually very problematic since now the Hitman team knows they're coming by train. But in any case, the episode then proceeds to end on a scene of Malone, who we sort of met but not really, talking with one of his comrades on the end of the phone. I don't know which one, and I don't recognize the voice, but in any case, Malone merely just reports back to whoever's on the other end about what he saw, which is namely that the train has been stopped. He found Prosciutto's horribly mangled body and found Pesci's body parts dumped in a river. Merely concludes that the seems that Team Bucciarati has actually eluded them for now. But remarks that that's not a very big deal, since he'll eventually find him again, because he actually found a blood sample, more specifically Bruno's. And that's where the episode ends. So yeah, I'm a little interested to see how that's actually going to play out now. We're not entirely sure what Malone's ability is, but if he concluded that he actually found a blood sample, then obviously the blood sample is going to be helpful for actually finding Team Bucciarati. I'm not entirely sure how, but should be interesting nonetheless. But more to the point, this episode not only showcases Pesci's newfound resolve in an assassin, even though he dies almost immediately after, but it is interesting seeing character growth for people who aren't the good guys. He's a villain and we're not supposed to root for him, but the episode very much frames it as this big triumphant moment for him, where he is one of the bad guys and he is an assassin and we're not supposed to like him. It does frame him as this big triumphant moment because he finally develops his resolve as an assassin and actually becomes a fully fledged assassin in this episode. So, yeah, while we're not supposed to like him, it is a triumphant moment for him because he does finally gain some newfound resolve in the process. But more to the point, we do finally get confirmation that Trish is indeed a stand user. We don't actually see her stand, but that thread will be pulled on at some point at a later date. So look forward to that. And finally, we have Malone, who is apparently going to do something weird with Bruno's blood, and I have no idea what it's actually going to be. So we're going to have to just keep an eye on that and hope and see what happens. But in any case, yeah, that's going to do it for my review of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon if you want to help support the show. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that I'm always saying thanks. So if you want to help support me, be sure to go donate to me there. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, there's actually 2 ways you can do that. One is by checking out my Twitch. Link is down in the description. I'm trying to stream. I'll try to stream again when Christmas is over-ish. So be sure to go check those out and just follow me over there so you don't miss it. And also be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen as well. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you guys do want to see something new or try something completely different, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. As the next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!